Picture a remote construction site in the heart of Africa. Midnight, dust swirling in the beam of a lone spotlight. And yet, the work hasn't stopped. Chinese engineers are pouring concrete for a new highway. A finance minister from a small nation watches closely. And thousands of miles away in Beijing, no one is speaking publicly about what's really happening here. A new kind of empire is being built. Not through armies, not through ideology, but through contracts, ports, loans, factories, and quiet, deliberate strategy. By the time most of the world noticed, China had already become the largest trading partner for more than 120 countries. It had secured shipping lanes, commodity rights, and diplomatic influence in places most people couldn't find on a map. This is the story of how a nation that once feared collapse constructed one of the most ambitious economic empires in modern history, and why the psychology behind this rise carries consequences that are only now becoming visible. When the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949, it was not a future superpower. It was one of the poorest nations on Earth. Factories were outdated, education was minimal, famine loomed regularly, and life expectancy was under 45. The idea that China would one day rival the United States economically would have sounded delusional. But beneath the hardship was a deeper psychological imprint that would define China's future strategy. Never again should China be vulnerable to foreign powers. Never again should it be weak. That fear, repeated through centuries of invasion, humiliation, and exploitation, became the ideological cement of China's economic doctrine. Under Mao Zedong, China pursued a centrally planned model. Industry was nationalized. Agriculture was collectivized. Markets were abolished. The goal wasn't prosperity, it was stability, ideological purity, and control. But the Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution devastated the economy. Tens of millions starved, factories collapsed, innovation froze. China was unified, but directionless. By the late 1970s, China faced a stark reality. It could not feed its people. It could not compete globally. And its ideology was economically unsustainable. The central tension emerged. Could the Communist Party maintain political control while unlocking the power of capitalism? The question would define China's next 40 years, and the answer would reshape the global economy. How China built an empire quietly, methodically, relentlessly. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping initiated reforms that would change everything. He didn't dismantle communism, he supplemented it. Markets returned, private businesses were tolerated. Foreign investment was invited, cautiously in small zones away from Beijing's political core. It was capitalism with training wheels, a controlled burn. An experiment conducted by a government terrified of losing power, but even more terrified of national failure. Special economic zones like Shenzhen were carved out as testing grounds. Low taxes, loose regulation, foreign partnerships. At first, only a few thousand people worked in these experimental cities. Within decades, they would house tens of millions of people. Shenzhen went from a fishing village to one of the world's most technologically advanced cities, faster than any urban transformation in human history. China had discovered a formula. Let capitalism create wealth. Let the party keep control. And as the wealth poured in, so did confidence and ambition. Construction became a national obsession. Roads, airports, power plants, ports, all expanded at staggering speed. For China, building infrastructure became a psychological assurance. If we build, growth will come. If we build enough, we will never again be weak. The world saw development. China saw security. In the 1990s, multinational corporations saw an opportunity. Cheap labor, huge workforce, rising stability. Manufacturing migrated en masse. China didn't simply accept foreign industry, it studied it, copied it, mastered it. By the early 2000s, China wasn't just making toys and clothes. It was producing electronics, appliances, components, and soon, technology. 2001 was a turning point. China joined the World Trade Organization, giving it formal access to global markets. Exports exploded, trade surpluses ballooned, and millions were lifted from poverty. Across the world, consumers got cheaper goods. China got something more valuable: leverage. For decades, China had been the apprentice, learning from Western corporations, reverse engineering foreign technology, and absorbing global supply chain expertise. But by the 2000s, the psychology flipped. China no longer saw itself as an emerging economy, it saw itself as an inevitable superpower, and its ambitions expanded beyond manufacturing. The 2008 financial crisis shook the world, except China. While Western economies spiraled, China unleashed a massive infrastructure stimulus. It rebuilt faster, grew faster, stabilized faster, and it learned something critical. The West is not invincible, and Chinese stability is a global asset many countries will rely on. In 2013, China launched the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, a $1 trillion plan to build ports, highways, rail systems, and power grids across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Europe. The strategy was simple. If you build a country's infrastructure, you shape its future. China offered loans, engineering teams, materials, labor, and technology. And in return, it gained access to shipping lanes, to natural resources, and to diplomatic alliances. Like the empires of old, China built influence through connection, but quietly and without firing a shot. Critics call BRI a trap. Supporters call it opportunity. And the truth lies somewhere in between. Some countries got highways and growth, others got debt and dependency, but the net effect was clear. China had positioned itself at the center of a new global network, one that bypassed traditional Western institutions. Ports in Sri Lanka, railways in Kenya, mining rights in South America, telecom networks across Africa. Wherever concrete was poured, Chinese influence followed. And this was a new kind of empire, subtle, transactional, and global, and built on as much psychology as on steel. By the 2010s, China was no longer satisfied with being the world's factory. It wanted to become the world's brain. Companies like Huawei, Tencent, ByteDance, DJI, and BYD exploded on the world stage. China led in drones, electric vehicles, batteries, e-commerce, digital payments, and AI. Innovation was no longer imported, it was exported. China recognized early that data would become the currency of power. It built national surveillance systems, integrated payment apps into daily life, and digitized social and financial activity at unprecedented scale. To the West, it looked dystopian. To China, it looked efficient and another layer of control to prevent instability. Despite its rise, one psychological force still defines Chinese policymaking: the fear of collapse, the fear of the Soviet Union's fate, the fear of internal rebellion, and the fear of economic stagnation. Every major decision, from housing policy to currency management to tech regulation, is shaped by the memory of vulnerability, and that fear fuels ambition. As China's influence grew, the world reacted. Trade wars, tariffs, semiconductor restrictions, security bans on telecom equipment, and diplomatic tensions. The illusion of China quietly rising began to crack. China now faces the same paradox every empire eventually encounters. Rapid expansion creates vulnerabilities. Debt in local governments, a slowing real estate sector, an aging population, capital controls, falling birth rates, and global scrutiny. The empire that seemed unstoppable now wrestles with the weight of its own scale. China's rise was built on a delicate balance: markets without political liberalization, capitalism without democracy, global integration without cultural assimilation. Can this system withstand global pressure, domestic slowdown, and a rising geopolitical rivalry? Or is the current moment the peak of China's power? No one really knows, but the next decade will reveal whether China's empire is sustainable or stretched too thin. China didn't conquer territory, it conquered supply chains. It didn't spread ideology, it spread infrastructure. and it didn't command loyalty, it purchased influence. This is an empire of relationships, constructed deal by deal, contract by contract, and investment by investment. And today, much of the world's economic gravity points towards Beijing. Western nations pursue quarterly earnings and election cycles. China pursues decades, sometimes centuries. Its long-term horizon is not an advantage rooted in intelligence, but in psychology. A belief that the nation must endure, a belief that weakness invites danger, and a belief that time is a weapon. And when a country believes that deeply, it plays a different game. China's rise has lifted hundreds of millions from poverty. It has transformed global trade, and it has rebalanced geopolitical power. But it also has exposed new risks: economic imbalances, diplomatic tensions, security fears, a reliance on control that tightens every year. The empire is powerful, but it's also fragile. China's story is not simply about growth. It's about ambition shaped by trauma, control shaped by fear, and confidence shaped by decades of calculated risk. It is the story of a nation that learned to wield globalization as a tool while guarding itself from the world it engaged with. And whether China's empire continues to rise or begins to plateau, its influence is permanent. Because in the quiet spaces between ports and railways, between supply chains and software, and between loans and long-term strategy, China built something far greater than an economy. It built the blueprint for a new kind of global power, crafted not through force, but through patience, precision, and the psychology of a nation determined to never be weak again.